For Whom the Bell Tolls. I was not exactly sure that I wanted to read this book, and then when it was given to me, I was definitely open to it and excited about it. I have a couple classics. Classics aren't the first thing that I jump to. My favorite genre is fantasy novels, so this is definitely a step in the in the other direction, and I think it's interesting that I'm doing a book review, my very first book review ever on a classic, and that's, it's just kind of interesting. So Ernest Hemingway went to Spain during the 1930s when the Spanish Civil War was going on. He wrote the book he published it in 1940. So I think it's cool that he probably got some of those realistic experiences while he was there and probably channeled those into the book. The premise of the book follows an American soldier that goes over there to assist during the Spanish Civil War. His job is to blow up a bridge, and then they're going to kind of time an attack at the same time that this bridge is being blown up. So the book spans over the course of 4 days. So it's a really interesting take for a war novel, something I didn't know. I didn't do any research on this book ahead of time. I just read it. I had no idea what to expect. I'd never read anything by Ernest Hemingway before, so all I knew was it was a kind of a war book about the Spanish Civil War, an American guy, and it goes, like I said, over the course of 4 days. So most of the book is like waiting around, telling stories. He can't just blow up the bridge at any time. He has to coordinate it with an attack, and he knows when that's going to be, and that's 4 days from the very beginning of the book. And I'm just telling you that the book ends right when the bridge is blowing up. So it's over 4 days, and which is just really weird to think about. It's a pretty good sized book. Not a lot happens. I would say it really gets into like the fatigue a person in war times goes through and stress, like not necessarily fighting. I think a lot of what happens in wars, which I don't know personally, but I think it's a lot of waiting. What's going to happen? When's the attack? What's the stress like while you're waiting? So the soldier in the book, he kind of has the book, or he has, the bridge he wants to blow. He kind of scopes it out, and then most of the rest of the time he's with this little guerrilla group, resistance people. They're fighting the fascists. So he's on the side of the resistance. They're fighting against the fascists. I just think it's kind of a spoiler, too, that the fascists ended up winning the war. Has nothing to do with the book, but, we get the perspective of an American soldier trying to help out the resistance, and I know that the fascists won the war. Very interesting. And a lot of, I don't know, in my opinion, a lot of what goes on with the characters is just like total boredom. To kind of get into how I felt reading the book, it just really goes along with the themes of the book, unfortunately. Like, I was pretty bored. It's not exactly a page turner. I mean, I'd be reading in the middle of chapters, and I'd be like, how much more of this chapter do I have before I can finish? I'd be reading in bed, and I'd be like, oh, I just don't want to do this. Like, I almost thought about not even finishing the book. So let's talk about some more of the technical stuff. So the book is supposedly written in Spanish, but it's translated into English because the book is actually in English, but all the people talking are supposedly speaking Spanish. He translates it very literally. He takes out all the idioms. So he's using these and thous all the time, and the sentences don't really make sense. Like, it's translated like, for example, he'll say, "What passes with you?" or "What passes you?" And that means, like, "How are you today?" And you just have to know that. Like, you just have to, you have to kind of think about it. It doesn't come naturally to me, anyway. He's using these and thous all the time. He uses the word obscenity and unspeakable. He'll be like, "Go obscenity yourself." In that sense, it's just like, it's weird. Like, you'll come across the word obscenity and you might not know what he's trying to get across there, but really he's using it in the place of just a curse word. I did do a little research on it afterwards and found out that this book is maybe not a good representation of all of Hemingway's works. I mean, I've never read anything else by him. I think that The Sun Also Rises and The Old Man and the Sea are supposed to be the best too, and apparently this book is very different than those, or written differently, mostly because of the Spanish translation. So I think that, I'm not saying I would never read it again or give him another shot. He's obviously supposed to be one of the best authors, but I didn't enjoy reading the book. Like, I didn't enjoy the writing style at all. I guess let's talk about character development. So there's not that many characters. Like I said, it's like a little guerrilla unit. They do talk about some flashbacks, and so you get some other characters, but for the most part, it's like Robert Jordan, the girl he falls in love with, Maria. There's another girl, and there's a couple other guys. There's like an old guy, there's the head of the resistance, and then there's a couple of Spaniards that are just part of the resistance. And that's really it. None of them are really fleshed out at all or developed, except for somewhat the main character, Robert Jordan, the American, and somewhat the head of the fascist group, and then the older woman who kind of is like, kind of has a history with the head of the fascist, or head of the resistance, and she kind of runs their little camp. Those are really the only three, and it's not even that much. It's just a little bit. Like, I feel like they're very stereotypical characters too. Like, I didn't really care about any of them, to be honest. I didn't really care what was going on, even the main character. Literally, I did not care. And I didn't feel like when I'm trying to write, or what I care about has a lot to do with character development. Like, I've read some books where I can't stop thinking about the characters, you know? So, and again, I guess my biggest part of any time I'm rating a book is like desire to read it, or how much would I tell somebody how much I loved it. Like, you have to go read it. I don't think I would ever encourage anyone to read this book. I would probably just say, if somebody asked me about it, I could talk to them about it, and there's some interesting things in it for sure. I mean, the flashbacks, I think the main premise of the book is about a dude that spends 4 days planning to blow up the bridge, and that's really it. But behind the scenes a little bit, there's more of like, just how there's more about how bad Civil War is. I mean, because really this is like, it's set in the Spanish Civil War, but a lot of the flashbacks talk about how like people in a small town that really get along for the most part and went to church together, you know, they really talk about this scene in a church, for example, and how they would normally just all get along, but they have different political beliefs, and now they're in a civil war, so they're violently killing each other. And I think it talks about some of the gruesome things that happened during that time period during civil wars. Would have happened with basically any civil war or revolution. I feel like a revolution is just what's called when, let's say the South had won, we would call the American Civil War a revolution. But because the North won, we call it a civil war. Before I give my overall rating, let's talk about the ending. The ending of the book is the totally redeeming quality of the book. The last 30 to 40 pages are page turners. I read through it incredibly fast. I was extremely excited to see what was going to happen. I am going to spoil it, so we'll talk about it. So at the end, Robert Jordan blows up the bridge, and the whole book, he's been kind of dealing with his love for Maria, and he kind of feels like the whole book he's going to die. So he's like talking, you know, the book is very repetitive, and he's talking about how he's living all his life in like 2 days with Maria. And he kind of knows he's going to die, or at least he thinks he's going to die. There's a good chance. And he lives this great life for 2 days with Maria. Then he goes and does his duty, blows up the bridge, and then when he's trying to run away, one of the main characters that's like the old guy, he dies during the explosion. And then Robert Jordan is running away, and a tank shoots his horse, falls down, breaks his leg, and he's not going to be able to leave when these people are coming in. So he like sends Maria off, says goodbye, and that he loves her. And basically the book ends with the opposition coming and they're approaching him, and then the book ends. Just kind of fades away. And and obviously like it's meant to say that Robert Jordan dies. Like, he's just sitting there leaning against a tree and there's nothing he can do, and the opposition walks up on him. So he dies. And I think it's awesome that he's the only one that you care about at all. Like, I didn't really care that much about him, but if you did care about any character in this book, it would be him. He really sticks to the landing, and it's a classic, and his writing is really good. So, the ending really did pull it all together for me, and I had considered not finishing it, so I'm really glad that I did. Again, I wouldn't recommend reading it. I don't think it's that great. I don't think it's worth the time it takes to get through it, because it's not an easy read. And I don't think during the process of reading it, I ever look forward to reading it. So you probably heard me be very repetitive in this video. I wouldn't recommend it. If you have any questions, though, let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I really appreciate it, and we'll have more